Let me take you back to that crisp Saturday morning when everything changed. The air smelled fresh, like the kind of day where anything feels possible. I had just returned home after picking up my brand new RV, the one I'd been dreaming about for years. It wasn't just any vehicle. It was a symbol of freedom, adventure, and new beginnings. As I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't help but smile ear to ear. My son, Liam, came running out of the house, his eyes wide with excitement. "Wow, Dad, is this really ours?" he asked, jumping up and down. I nodded proudly. "Sure is, buddy. This is going to be our ticket to all those trips we've been talking about." I could already picture it. Weekends by the lake, camping under the stars, maybe even a cross-country road trip someday. The RV gleamed in the sunlight, its polished surface reflecting the trees lining our street. To me, it looked perfect. But little did I know, not everyone shared my enthusiasm. As Liam and I stood admiring the RV, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. Across the street, Karen Whitmore emerged from her house. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, you probably know someone like Karen. She's always dressed impeccably, carrying herself as if she owns the place, which, in her mind, she sort of does. Karen is the head of the Birchwood Estates Homeowners Association, and she takes her role very seriously. Too seriously, some might say. Karen strode toward us with purpose, her clipboard tucked neatly under her arm. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her sunglasses hid whatever emotion might have been flickering in her eyes. "Good morning," I said cheerfully, hoping to preempt any issues. After all, how could anyone object to such a beautiful piece of machinery? She stopped at the edge of my driveway, tilting her head slightly as she examined the RV. Then, without so much as a greeting, she asked flatly, "What is that?" I chuckled nervously, thinking she was joking. "This? Oh, this is my new RV. Pretty cool, right?" Her expression didn't change. Instead, she adjusted her glasses and pointed at the RV like it was something offensive. "You can't park that here." My smile faded. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she replied matter-of-factly. "It's against the rules." "Rules? What rules?" I glanced around, half expecting someone to jump out and yell, "Gotcha." But no, Karen was dead serious. She tapped her clipboard for emphasis, her tone icy. Section 7.3 of the HOA Guidelines clearly states that recreational vehicles cannot remain parked in driveways or on streets for more than 48 hours. You'll need to move it immediately, or else. Or else what? I shot back, starting to feel irritated. It's my property, my driveway. Where exactly am I supposed to put it? Her lips curled into a smug grin. "Or else we'll have it towed." Towed? For parking in my own driveway? I stared at her, dumbfounded. Was this woman for real? Here I was, standing in front of my house, minding my own business, and she wanted to call a tow truck over an RV that hadn't even been there for 24 hours. Something about her demeanor rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't just about the RV anymore. It felt personal, like she was deliberately trying to assert dominance. Liam tugged at my sleeve, sensing the tension. "Dad, what's going on?" I forced a reassuring smile. "Nothing, buddy. Everything's fine." But inside, I was seething. How dare she march over here and dictate what I could do with my own property? Who made her the arbiter of acceptable behavior? That night, as I flipped through the thick HOA handbook, I found the dreaded rule buried deep within its pages. **** recreational vehicles must be stored out of sight. ***, out of sight. Seriously, where was I supposed to hide a 35-foot RV? In the attic? Behind the couch? The absurdity of it all made me laugh. At first. But soon, reality set in. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a challenge, one I wasn't ready to back down from. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of unease. The RV still sat in my driveway, gleaming innocently under the early sunlight. But now it felt like a ticking time bomb. Karen's words echoed in my mind. Asterisk, you'll need to move it immediately, or else. Asterisk, her threat lingered like a storm cloud, casting a shadow over what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. I decided to do some digging. After all, if this was really about rules, then maybe understanding them would give me an edge. I grabbed the HOA handbook and flipped through its pages again, this time more carefully. It was overwhelming. Pages upon pages of tiny print detailing everything from mailbox colors to acceptable lawn ornaments. Some of the rules were reasonable, sure, but others, they bordered on ridiculous. For instance, did you know that holiday decorations can only stay up for 2 weeks after the event? Or that trees in front yards must be pruned to a specific height? Who even thinks of these things? But the rule about recreational vehicles stood out the most. According to Section 7.3, RVs, boats, trailers, and anything non-residential had to be stored out of sight. Out of sight meant either inside a garage or at an off-site storage facility. That was fine for people with massive garages or extra cash to rent storage space. But what about everyone else? What about me? As I read deeper, something else caught my attention. Many of the rules seemed vague, open to interpretation. For example, what exactly qualified as out of sight? Did it mean completely hidden from view, or just not obviously visible from the street? And who got to decide whether something violated the guidelines? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much power rested in Karen's hands, and how easily it could be abused. By mid-morning, the orange notice appeared, taped neatly to my front door. It screamed asterisk violation of COVNANT. Immediate action, required asterisk in bold letters. Beneath it was a breakdown of penalties. $50 for the first day, $100 for the second, and escalating fines thereafter. If I didn't comply within 72 hours, they'd call a tow truck. My stomach churned as I ripped the paper down. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a full-blown attack. Things got worse when the neighbors started reacting. At first, it was subtle. Mrs. Peterson across the street gave me a sympathetic nod while watering her flowers, but she quickly looked away when Karen walked by. Mr. Harris, who usually waved hello every morning, avoided eye contact altogether. Even my buddy Greg, who lived a few doors down, seemed hesitant to engage. When I mentioned the situation during our usual weekend chat, he shrugged uncomfortably. Look, man, I get it, but you don't want to mess with Karen. She doesn't play around. His words stuck with me. Was I making too big a deal out of this? Maybe I should just cave, find a storage unit, and move on. But every time I glanced at the RV, pride swelled in my chest. This wasn't just a vehicle, it represented months of saving, planning, and dreaming. Giving in felt like surrendering a piece of myself. Karen didn't stop there. By Monday afternoon, she showed up unannounced, with reinforcements. 2 other members of the HOA board trailed behind her, looking uncomfortable but determined. They gathered near my mailbox, whispering among themselves before approaching me. "We've given you plenty of opportunities to resolve this," Karen said, her tone clipped. "If the RV isn't removed by Friday, we'll proceed with towing." Her voice carried an air of finality, but I refused to back down. "It's parked legally in my driveway," I shot back, crossing my arms. "You can't just tow it because you don't like how it looks." She smirked, clearly enjoying the confrontation. "Actually, we can. And we will." The standoff grew tense. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, curious spectators drawn to the drama unfolding right in front of them. Kids paused their games, staring wide-eyed as Karen gestured dramatically toward the RV. Even Liam, who had been playing basketball in the driveway, stopped mid-dribble, sensing the gravity of the moment. That evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just an RV. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was asserting control, testing boundaries, seeing how far she could push until someone pushed back. And suddenly, I knew I couldn't let her win. Not this time. By Tuesday morning, the situation had escalated to a level I hadn't anticipated. The orange violation notice on my door felt like a neon sign broadcasting my defiance to the entire neighborhood. Karen's threats weren't idle. She was serious about towing my RV, and she wasn't shy about letting everyone know it. Word spread quickly, and soon, Birchwood Estates buzzed with gossip. Some neighbors whispered behind closed doors, while others openly stared as they passed by my house. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. The tension reached a boiling point during our weekly HOA meeting, a gathering I usually skipped but decided to attend this time. Walking into the community center felt surreal. The room was packed, filled with familiar faces I'd known for years. Yet, something felt off. People avoided making eye contact with me, shifting awkwardly in their seats. Karen stood at the front of the room, her clipboard in hand, looking every bit the queen of her self-proclaimed kingdom. "Let's begin," she announced, her voice sharp and commanding. She skimmed through routine updates, budget reports, landscaping schedules, but it was clear she was saving the main event for last. When she finally turned her attention to the RV issue, the atmosphere shifted. Her lips curled into a smug smile as she addressed the crowd. "As many of you are aware, there's been a blatant disregard for community guidelines." She paused dramatically, letting her words sink in. Specifically, Section 7.3. A murmur rippled through the room. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged uneasy glances. I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't just about rules. It was about respect. Respect for individuals and their property. But Karen didn't see it that way. To her, the RV was an eyesore, a disruption to the pristine image she wanted to maintain for Birchwood Estates. When she finished her speech, she opened the floor for discussion. At first, no one spoke. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Greg, my neighbor across the street, cleared his throat. "I understand the importance of keeping the neighborhood tidy," he began hesitantly, "but maybe we're being too rigid here. Is it really worth all this drama over an RV?" Karen's smile faltered for a split second, but she recovered quickly. "This isn't about aesthetics alone," she countered, her tone icy. "It's about maintaining standards. If we allow one exception, where does it end? Next thing you know, people will be parking boats and trailers in their driveways." Her argument might have sounded reasonable to some, but I couldn't help noticing how calculated it was. She wasn't just defending rules. She was instilling fear. Fear of chaos. Fear of change. Fear of losing control. And unfortunately, it worked. A few residents nodded along, agreeing with her without questioning whether the rule itself made sense. After the meeting, I found myself surrounded by a small group of curious neighbors. Most offered polite condolences, saying things like, "I'm sorry you're going through this," or "Good luck with Karen." But there were also skeptical looks and murmurs about how I should just move the RV to avoid trouble. It stung, hearing those comments from people I considered friends. Had they forgotten what it meant to stand together? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jolt awake, convinced Karen had sent a tow truck in the dead of night. When dawn finally broke, I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to let her intimidate me into submission. I started drafting a petition, not just to challenge the RV rule but to demand transparency within the HOA. I wanted answers. Who wrote these rules? Why were they so strict? And why did Karen always get her way? To my surprise, support came faster than I expected. Greg signed almost immediately, followed by Mrs. Peterson, who admitted she'd always hated the mailbox color rule. Even Mr. Harris, who had initially avoided me, added his name after learning about the petition. By Wednesday evening, nearly half the neighborhood had joined the cause. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could take back our community and my driveway from Karen's iron grip. But deep down, I knew the fight was far from over. Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. And neither would I. By Thursday, the neighborhood was buzzing with a mix of excitement and tension. The petition I'd started had gained real momentum, and it felt like we were standing on the edge of something big. People who had previously kept their heads down were now speaking up, some cautiously, others boldly. But not everyone was happy about it. Karen, in particular, looked like she was ready to explode. Word got around that she had called an emergency HOA meeting for Friday evening. Normally, these meetings were dull affairs with low attendance, but this time, the community center was packed. Chairs were filled to capacity, and latecomers stood along the walls, craning their necks to see what would happen next. The air buzzed with whispered conversations as neighbors exchanged opinions about the RV rule and about Karen's leadership. When Karen walked in, she carried herself with her usual air of authority, but there was something different about her demeanor. Her jaw was clenched, and her clipboard trembled slightly in her hands. She took her place at the front of the room, surveying the crowd with a steely gaze. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she began, her voice sharp and clipped. "This so-called petition is nothing more than an attempt to undermine the integrity of our community," she declared, her tone dripping with disdain. "These rules exist for a reason, to protect property values and maintain order. If we start bending them for personal convenience, where does it end?" Her words hung in the air, met with a mixture of nods and frowns. Some residents clearly agreed with her, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Greg leaned over to me and muttered, "She's losing them. Watch." Sure enough, the tide was turning. A young couple sitting near the front raised their hands hesitantly. When Karen nodded for them to speak, the wife said, "We signed the petition because we think the RV rule is unfair. Not everyone has the means to store vehicles off-site. Shouldn't we find a compromise instead of punishing people?" Karen's smile faltered. "Compromise," she echoed, her voice rising. "This isn't about fairness. It's about respecting the realities." Her outburst startled the room into silence. Even her staunchest supporters exchanged uneasy glances. Sensing an opening, Mrs. Peterson spoke up. "I've lived here for 15 years, and I've always followed the rules. But lately, they've started to feel excessive, like the mailbox color policy or the restrictions on holiday decorations. Are these things really necessary?" The room erupted into murmurs of agreement. One by one, people chimed in, sharing their frustrations. Mr. Harris admitted he'd been fined last summer for having a garden gnome that didn't meet aesthetic standards. Another neighbor complained about being penalized for leaving a moving truck in his driveway overnight during a family emergency. Each story added fuel to the growing fire of dissent. Karen tried to regain control, slamming her clipboard onto the table and raising her voice. "You're all missing the point. This isn't about gnomes or mailboxes. It's about maintaining our community standards." But her attempts to intimidate only made her look more unreasonable. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that the balance of power was shifting. For years, Karen had ruled Birchwood Estates with an iron fist, relying on fear and compliance to enforce her will. Now, faced with united resistance, her grip was slipping. As the crowd dispersed, several neighbors approached me to express their support. "Keep fighting," one said firmly. "We've let her run things for too long." Even those who hadn't signed the petition seemed reluctant to defend Karen anymore. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope. That night, as I sat on my porch watching the stars, I realized something important. This fight wasn't just about an RV or even about challenging outdated rules. It was about reclaiming our voices, about reminding ourselves that communities are built on trust and cooperation, not fear and control. And if Karen thought she could scare us into submission, she was dead wrong. We were done playing by her rules. Friday morning arrived with a heaviness in the air. The neighborhood seemed quieter than usual, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see how this showdown would unfold. True to her word, Karen didn't waste any time. By 8 a.m., she'd shown up at my driveway. Tow truck in tow, pun intended. The driver parked on the street, looking uneasy, while Karen stood nearby, arms crossed and lips pursed into a thin line. I had been expecting this moment, but seeing it play out in real life still sent a jolt of anger through me. I stepped outside, planting myself firmly between the RV and the tow truck. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. Karen didn't flinch. "You've had your chance," she said coolly. "Now we're taking matters into our own hands." The audacity of her words stunned me. Taking matters into her own hands. On my asterisk property, I glanced at the tow truck driver, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Do you really want to tow an RV that's legally parked in my driveway?" I asked him directly. He hesitated, glancing nervously at Karen. "Look, man, I'm just doing my job." Before things could escalate further, Greg appeared, walking briskly from across the street. He carried his phone in one hand, its screen glowing brightly. "Smile for the camera, Karen," he said, holding it up. "This is going live." For a split second, Karen froze, her confident facade cracking. "What are you doing?" she snapped, stepping toward him. "Giving the neighborhood, and maybe the whole internet, a front row seat to your latest power trip," Greg replied with a smirk. He tapped the screen, and within seconds, the live stream began broadcasting to social media. Comments poured in almost instantly. "Is this woman serious? Good luck, neighbor. Hashtag safe there of he." Karen turned red, sputtering indignantly. "Turn that off. This is private property." "Actually," Greg countered, "public streets are fair game. And judging by the comments, people are loving this." The crowd grew quickly. Neighbors poured out of their homes, drawn by the commotion. Some cheered when they saw the RV, while others filmed the scene on their phones. Even kids gathered around, giggling as they watched Karen squirm under the spotlight. It was chaos, but the kind that felt empowering. "You can't fight the rules," Karen shouted, trying to regain control. "This isn't about one person. It's about the entire community." "Oh, spare us the speech," Mrs. Peterson called out from the sidelines. "We all know this is about your ego, Karen." Her comment drew laughter and applause from the growing audience. Embarrassed and clearly outnumbered, Karen signaled for the tow truck to leave. "Fine," she spat, "but don't think this is over." As the tow truck drove away, the tension broke, replaced by a wave of relief and triumph. People clapped me on the back, congratulating me for standing my ground. Liam ran up to me, grinning ear to ear. "Dad, you did it. You stopped them." I ruffled his hair, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. "Not yet, buddy. We're not done fighting. But today feels like a win." Later that evening, as I scrolled through the comments on Greg's livestream, I realized just how far-reaching the impact had been. Local news outlets picked up the story, turning our quiet suburban drama into headline material. Reporters reached out for interviews, eager to cover what they dubbed the Great RV Rebellion. One article even quoted a legal expert who questioned the legality of towing vehicles from private driveways without proper cause. But more importantly, the incident galvanized the neighborhood. People who had once kept to themselves were now actively engaging with each other. Block parties were planned, petitions circulated, and discussions about reforming the HOA gained traction. For years, fear of Karen's wrath had silenced dissent. Now it seemed that silence had been broken, for good. Still, I knew better than to celebrate too soon. Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. She might have retreated temporarily, but I doubted she'd let this go without a fight. Whatever came next, though, I was ready. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. The days following the showdown felt like a whirlwind. The neighborhood was buzzing with energy, and for the first time in years, it wasn't just about gossip or complaints. It was about action. People were talking openly, sharing their frustrations, and brainstorming ways to make Birchwood Estates a better place. It was as if Karen's attempt to tow my RV had cracked open a dam of pent-up resentment, and now there was no stopping the flood. Karen, on the other hand, seemed to vanish into thin air. She stopped attending HOA meetings altogether, claiming she was too busy to participate. Her absence left a noticeable void. Without her sharp tone and clipboard-wielding presence, the meetings became less tense and more collaborative. Even the board members who had always sided with her began to soften, admitting privately that some of the rules were outdated and unnecessarily strict. But Karen wasn't done yet. Behind the scenes, she worked tirelessly to rally her dwindling supporters. Flyers appeared on doorsteps overnight, accusing me of disrupting community harmony and urging residents to restore order. At first, I worried these tactics might sway public opinion back in her favor, but instead, they only fueled more backlash. Neighbors started questioning why Karen, and not the actual homeowners, was dictating what constituted harmony. One evening, during an impromptu gathering at Greg's house, we decided to take things a step further. Armed with ideas and determination, we drafted a proposal to overhaul the HOA guidelines. Our goal wasn't to abolish all rules. Rather, we wanted fairer, more practical policies that reflected the needs of modern families. For instance, instead of banning RVs outright, why not allow them to stay visible for limited periods each year? And why enforce arbitrary restrictions on flower pots or holiday decorations when they added character to the neighborhood? To our surprise, even some former allies of Karen joined the effort. One board member admitted she'd only gone along with Karen's demands because she feared retaliation. "I've hated those rules for years," she confessed, "but no one ever stood up before." With our proposal ready, we presented it at the next HOA meeting. This time, the atmosphere was different. Instead of fear and tension, there was hope and optimism. Residents spoke passionately about creating a community based on mutual respect rather than rigid enforcement. When the vote finally took place, the results were overwhelming. Nearly everyone supported reforming the guidelines. For Karen, this was the final blow. Unable to face the humiliation of losing control, she quietly resigned from the HOA board. Rumor had it she put her house on the market shortly after, though no one knew for sure where she planned to move. Some joked that she'd probably found another neighborhood to terrorize, but most didn't care. Her reign was over, and Birchwood Estates could finally breathe again. As the dust settled, the changes began to take shape. New rules were implemented, striking a balance between maintaining property values and allowing personal freedom. The RV rule was amended to allow temporary parking, provided owners kept their vehicles clean and maintained. Other outdated regulations, like the mailbox color policy, were scrapped entirely. The transformation went beyond just rules, though. People started reconnecting in ways they hadn't in years. Block parties became regular events, and neighbors volunteered together for cleanup days. Kids played freely in the streets, their laughter echoing through the cul-de-sacs. What had once felt like a sterile, controlled environment now felt alive, with warmth, camaraderie, and genuine community spirit. Still, I couldn't help but reflect on how much damage Karen's leadership had caused. For years, fear had silenced us, keeping us isolated and divided. It took something as simple as an RV to remind us of the power of standing together. As I watched Liam chase his friends around the yard one sunny afternoon, I realized how lucky we were to have reclaimed our neighborhood, not just from Karen, but from the culture of intimidation she had fostered. And through it all, one thing remained constant: my RV, proudly parked in the driveway, a symbol of resilience and unity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we'd face them head-on, as a community. Months later, life in Birchwood Estates felt like a completely different world. The RV still sat proudly in my driveway, gleaming under the sunlight like it belonged there. Because it did. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It had become a symbol of something bigger, standing up for what's right and refusing to let fear dictate how we live our lives. The neighborhood itself had transformed. Gone were the days of tiptoeing around Karen's rules or worrying about surprise inspections. In their place was a sense of freedom, a shared understanding that this community belonged to all of us, not just one person with a clipboard. People decorated their homes however they pleased, planted wildflowers in their yards, and even left holiday lights up well past the 2-week limit without guilt. For the first time, Birchwood Estates felt less like a gated fortress and more like a real home. Liam loved every minute of it. He'd grown close to the kids on the block, organizing bike races and impromptu soccer games in the cul-de-sac. On weekends, families gathered for barbecues, sharing stories and laughter over plates of burgers and potato salad. There was an ease to everything now, a warmth that had been missing before. Even the older neighbors, who used to keep to themselves, joined in the fun, bringing desserts or offering gardening tips. But perhaps the most rewarding change was seeing how people came together when challenges arose. When Mr. Harris fell ill and couldn't mow his lawn, half a dozen neighbors showed up with lawnmowers to help out. When Mrs. Peterson needed someone to watch her dog while she visited family, 3 volunteers stepped forward within minutes. These small acts of kindness reminded me why communities exist in the first place, not for rules and regulations, but for connection and support. As for Karen, rumors circulated that she'd moved to a condo downtown, far away from the chaos she tried so hard to control. Some said she missed her old role, while others claimed she'd found a new HOA to boss around. Either way, her absence gave us room to grow. And grow we did. The reforms we implemented stuck, creating a system that worked for everyone. Rules weren't abandoned altogether, but they became flexible enough to accommodate real-life situations. The RV rule, for example, allowed temporary parking as long as vehicles were kept tidy. It was a compromise that satisfied both sides, proving that solutions didn't have to be black and white. One crisp autumn morning, I finally took the RV out for its maiden voyage. Liam and I packed snacks, blankets, and fishing gear, ready for a weekend at the lake. As we backed out of the driveway, I noticed Greg waving from across the street. "Have fun," he called out, giving me a thumbs up. "We will," I shouted back, grinning. And we did. That trip turned into one of the best weekends of our lives. Campfires, stargazing, and endless conversations about nothing and everything. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. When we returned home, the RV looked right where it belonged, in the driveway, surrounded by trees painted gold by fall. Neighbors greeted us warmly, asking how the trip went and sharing their own travel dreams. It struck me then that the RV wasn't just mine anymore. It represented hope, possibility, and the strength of a united community. Looking back, I realized that fighting Karen wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about reclaiming our voices, about remembering that rules should serve people, not the other way around. And though the journey had been messy and exhausting, it taught me something valuable. Sometimes standing your ground, even when it feels impossible, is worth every ounce of effort. So here's to Karen, wherever she is. Thanks to her, I learned that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about facing your fears anyway. And if she ever decides to visit Birchwood Estates again, I'll gladly offer her a ride in the RV. Who knows? Maybe she'll finally loosen up.